Hey everybody, it's your boy Baseman Awakens, checking in with you for another video. This video's topic is about Black America and SHTF, and I'm not gonna curse in this, but you know what that means. Um, this this video or this topic actually popped into my mind a couple of days ago due to a number of things that I've seen in the news, and I'm like, this would be a perfect topic to cover. So I'm doing the video. But before I get into it, for those of you who are new, I am Baseman Awakes. I speak from the perspective of a man who, over the last 5 years, has come to transform himself within this matrix. A man who's come to recognize that he does live in a matrix. And through utilizing a codified response, i.e., Neely Fuller, and also understanding what the matrix is via Alan Watts, I really have come to empower myself, and I decided to do this YouTube channel to share some of the lessons I learned with you guys, and also just talk about things that are very important to my heart, or just things that I think that need to be discussed. Hence, Black America and shit hit the fan. I guess I'm cursing in this video. So, for those of you who are not familiar, what is shit hit the fan? Shit hit the fan, SHTF for short, is essentially a scenario in which our society or civilization breaks down. Now, this breakdown can be caused by a number of different things. For those of you who are in the prepping community or who are a little bit more aware, there are a number of scenarios that people have been talking about for years. For example, earthquakes in California that will decimate the western part of the US, or the death or the declining value of the US dollar, which I'll do another video about that. And just a general background on that, a lot of people believe that the US dollar would no longer be the world's currency. You know, if you go on vacation, you can trade in US dollars. If you're in a tourist spot, you can actually use the US dollars. That will come to an end. And people believe if that comes to an end, that the US dollar will be essentially worthless and our standard of living will become third world like. Yeah, so based on this topic, I'm pretty sure some of you guys are thinking, is this guy a prepper? No, I'm not a prepper, but I do recognize the importance of what many preppers talk about. So I do pay attention to a number of prepper YouTube channels and also websites, because the information is just good to have in overall in terms of understanding human nature, which we'll be talking about when things get dicey. Just having a prepared mindset, like in terms of having emergency materials or a bug out packet in the back of your car. That's something good to have just in general. Like if you're like me, where you live in the Northeast, we get a lot of heavy snowfall, and just having something prepared like that is good for you overall. So no, I'm not a prepper, but I do take the information and actively implement it into my life, and I recommend that you guys do the same. All right, now we're gonna get into it. Oh, before I actually get into the topic, there are a certain prepper resources I would recommend to you guys if you're looking to find out more. On YouTube, there is a man called Demcad, DEMCAD. His YouTube channel is great. He talks about various types of topics related to shit hit the fan. And again, you don't have to think that far, but in terms of shit hit the fan scenarios, but he just provides good information in terms of you being prepared to handle any type of large or small issue. Also, in terms of a website, Modern Survival Blog, definitely recommended you guys check that out. Great, very great material. Now, getting into it, the reasons. Oh, dude, I didn't even say what my conclusion is about Black America hit the fan. My conclusion is that Black people won't survive. And I think for some people that might sound harsh, but I'm explaining to you why. There are a number of reasons why, if we have a societal level, which means a huge across the board, all over the country, shit hit the fan scenario, that the vast majority of Black people are not going to make it. One, most Black people live in urban centers. Urban centers are artificial constructs, i.e., they are not natural institutions, which means urban centers, cities, and the suburbs around them have to be supplied and maintained externally. They get all their food from external sources. They get all their water from external sources. They get their power, for the most part, from external sources. Even if there's a power plant within your city, what actually powers that power plant comes from someplace else in most cases, right? And as I was saying before, Since cities are artificial constructs, is institutions, the police force, the fire force, governments, schools, etc., 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 that maintains them, not personal relationships, which you actually would recognize more in smaller towns and villages and in rural areas, was the relationships that people have between each other that maintains the glue, as opposed to these governmental institutions, which are also artificial. Hear me out. Hear me out. All right. So think about, that's just the beginning part, which applies to everybody. It doesn't matter what color you are living within an urban area, but specifically applying to Black people. Now we're taking another level deeper, right? Black people within these urban areas have no economic base, which means that either within the Black communities in those areas or as a whole, we don't really influence the economic engine of that area other than spending, right? Even though spending is a very important part of the economic engine, but we don't, above that, we're not involved in any of those other ladders like distribution, sales, and ownership. So, for example, supermarkets, we don't really own any of them, whether they be independent mom and pops or chains. Hardware stores, same exact thing. Even the convenience stores that you see in most Black communities are owned and run by other racial groups. That in itself is a very dangerous thing. And I'm really going to go into that when I talk about my casebook example, right? Also within the Black community, and I think this is related to politics and also institutional racism, that in most Black communities, particularly outside of the South, the only people that really own weapons are the criminals. Now, many Black people are against gun rights and also favor gun restrictions, and that's understandable due to the high level of violence within poorer Black communities. But in a shit fit hit the fan scenario, a firearm is something that you will need because the worst in human nature comes out when people are desperate. Then on top of that, so we're going down levels, right? First, you have a city, which is an artificial structure. Then the fact that Black people have no economic base. Now we're going to be talking about specifically the Black community within that. First, we were talking about neighborhoods. Now we're going into the community. Black people, realistically, we don't have a sense of community, and I think that the lack of economic base definitely plays into that. Like you go to other communities, even the poor ones, it's just a different sense of things that are going on. For the most part, they have intact family structures. Within the Black community, I think now it's 80% in certain areas, up to 80% were single parent households. Single parent households will definitely be at a disadvantage in a shit hitting the fan scenario because regardless of what the media tells you, a woman cannot do it all. Men and women have certain roles. The man is supposed to be the provider and the protector. If it's a single parent household, particularly with multiple kids, you're going to be at a disadvantage. You're not going to have the resources or the money to be able to survive or potentially exit that SHTF scenario, right? And that's also another danger within living in an urban community is that, particularly if you're living in a major metropolitan area such as New York City or Washington, D.C. or L.A., your likelihood of being able to afford a vehicle or your likelihood of being able to escape the shit hitting the fan scenario is actually slim, not just to the fact that if you might not own a vehicle, but if you own a vehicle, you're going to be stuck in traffic for hours. Why? Because there's only so many ways to get into that urban area, and there's only so many ways to get out. And everybody's going to be doing the same thing as you. So I covered a number of different topics in terms of why I think that Black America, in a societal level, which means across the whole country, would, for the most part, not survive shit hit the fan scenario. Now I'm going to go into the textbook example of this, tying everything together, right? Hurricane Katrina, 2004. I remember when that happened, I was actually in college and, at that time I was a little bit more naive and I really didn't understand how the world worked. That was before the awakening, so I was still in that baseman stage, right? And I was watching the coverage of Hurricane Katrina, the failure of the Bush administration to properly respond to the needs of all people within the New Orleans, Louisiana, Gulf Coast area. But in examining the fallout from that, you'll definitely, I begin to see elements of the things that I'm talking to you guys about today, right? In terms of particularly the poor Black people not being able to get out of the disaster zone. Because why? They didn't own vehicles. They didn't have resources. Even after the actual hurricane hit, the fact that Black people didn't have any economic economic resources or economic base came true with certain other communities, certain other races. They were able to help each other because they owned grocery stores, they owned convenience stores, they owned other types of businesses that they could utilize the services or the skills or the expertise within that to help each other. And also, too, I mean, I'm just going to say bluntly, like in terms of understanding how white people operated, there were substantiated cases, i.e., it's been proven that when, even for the black people that are able to escape New Orleans, when they were trying to move into the suburbs or some of the more rural counties, they were stopped at the border by armed, not police, by armed white civilians who said, "You're not coming into our community," which speaks to another aspect of shit hit the fan where how black people were not going to get any help from no other racial group because they're going to be too busy looking out for their own. But unfortunately, since we really don't have a strong sense of community and so many of our households are headed by these independent women, many black people were at a disadvantage. Now, obviously, there are other elements to this. You know, there was a lot of government failure, institutional racism, also failure of the black leadership within New Orleans, the mayor, certain other city agency commissioners to do their jobs properly. But I think if we want to be honest with ourselves, Hurricane Katrina, the vast majority of the people who died, particularly within New Orleans, were black. And not only were black, they were poor black people. So I think Hurricane Katrina, there are a lot of lessons that the black community can draw for that. And if we are willing to take a more accurate look at ourselves in terms of any shit hit the fan scenario. Now, me personally, I don't necessarily believe that any of these scenarios are going to definitely happen, but I do believe that they can happen. And things on a smaller level happen all the time. So it's good to have that mindset in place in terms of, for example, if you live in a place where there's a lot of snowfall, hey, and it snows, 10, 12 feet over a couple hours, guess what? You're going to be stuck inside for a couple of days. You won't be able to go out. You'll be lucky if you still have electricity. So having that prepper mindset, not necessarily being a prepper, but having that prepper mindset will help to make things easier for you to manage these type of situations that will come up. The destruction of the U.S. dollar, maybe. Destruction of the western portion of America through hurricanes or some other act of God level, act of, what do they call it, act of God level event, maybe. But will you have a small emergency in your personal life? Yeah. Will you have an emergency within your community? Definitely. So having that prepper mindset will only help you when you find yourselves in those situations. Of course, I love you guys' feedback. You let me know what happened to, what are your thoughts on this topic? What will happen specifically in your community among your family members and friends? And I thank you for checking in. Baseman Awakens. Look for the next video. Thanks.